So today it's all about investing in microloans. If you are a P2P investor, it's likely that you are currently actually investing in microloans or you have done it at least at some point in the past. Microloans are short-term consumer loans, or as many people like to call them, payday loans. Anyway, we've got a question from our community and investors are wondering why they only get 11% interest from payday loans while the lender charges anywhere between 40 and 3,500% annual interest to the borrowers. So in this video, we will dive deeper into payday loans and give you a bit more information that may impact your decisions to invest in this asset class. My name is Jakub from P2P Empower, and if you're new to this channel and your goal is to become a more educated P2P investor, consider subscribing and hit the like button if you want to see more content like this in the future. So what's today's video all about? First, I'll give you some introduction to the loan type. Next, we will talk about the pricing of the loans, some risks you should consider, pros and cons, and we will round up the video with some takeaways. So what are payday loans? Well, payday loans are short-term consumer loans. It's basically a loan with a loan term of around 30 days. The loan amount varies typically between 100 and 1,000 euro, and the interest ranges between 40 and 3,500% per year. Those loans are unsecured, which means that they are not backed by any collateral. This means that the lending company cannot sell any collateral if the borrower does not repay the debt. If the borrower doesn't repay the loan, the company will likely charge the person additional fees, send the person several reminders, and at some point sell the claim to a debt collector. You should note that if the borrower does not repay the loan, he or she will lose his credit score, and in many societies this can have a really negative impact on their daily lives. So borrowers who don't repay their loan can expect regular calls from the debt collector, and usually those talks are not very comfortable. Non-paying borrowers will also likely be denied when buying a car or on leasing or even ordering a credit card. Now, you might be wondering, what are the requirements for the borrowers to obtain such a loan? Well, the creditworthiness of the borrower needs to be a positive, otherwise he or she gets denied. At the end of the day, the lending company wants to lend money only to people where the chances are high that the borrower will be able to repay the loan. In most cases, the borrower needs to be at least 18 years old. In some countries like Poland, for instance, the minimum age is actually 19. Borrowers also need to provide their income reports, and they cannot have a negative entry in the national debt collector registries. When it comes to the requirements, long term and APR, most of the time you can check the terms and conditions on the website of the lending company. There is usually a long FAQ list which will answer most of the questions borrowers might have. Lending companies are required to disclose the APR in several jurisdictions. It's however not always the case. When we, for instance, look at this lending company's landing page in Vietnam, we could not find any APR. So it seems like it always comes down to the regulators and the markets where the lender is operating. At the beginning of this video, we mentioned that the APR for those types of loans is somewhere between 40 and 3,500%. We will later on also cover some of the reasons for those high rates, but for now, you might be wondering, why would someone borrow money for such huge interest in the first place? Well, the general idea is actually that only people who cannot get a loan from the bank and need to cover urgent bills are applying for payday loans. This is likely true in many countries, but we wanted to find out more, which is why we reached out to Robocash Group to gather some more accurate information. The lender was happy to share with us some additional data, which is kind of hard to obtain, or at least many lending companies are not really willing to share it. So on this chart, you can see all the reasons why people take payday loans from Robocash in Russia. Most borrowers use the money to cover unexpected expenses, but also many use it to cover house renovation or car repayments, for instance. Around 12% use payday loans to cover general purchases or medical expenses. A bit more than 5% use it to buy gifts, pay for bills, or cover the gap until the next income. And roughly 4% use it to cover educational expenses. So as you see, most of the reasons are time-sensitive matters. You should know, however, that this can also vary depending on the market. So for instance, in Asia, the main reasons why people take payday loans are to cover educational and medical expenses, household appliances and electronics, or even business expenses. The fact is that payday loan companies are targeting underbanked borrowers, or to put it simply, people who don't get access to the bank loan. It's just a very different segment of borrowers in many developing countries where the regulation isn't as strict with alternative lenders. So now you might be thinking, great, so I'm lending money for people who are not able to get a loan from the bank. Chances that they won't repay the loan are quite high then, right? Well, it's not as straightforward, and it comes down to the lending practices of the lenders, the recovery and default rates. Now you might be wondering, what are then the default rates of individual lenders? Well, you can reach out to them and ask. Instead of showing you some made-up numbers from irrelevant payday loan companies, here is some actual data that we were able to retrieve from Robocash. On this chart, you can see the default rates from 5 different lenders in various markets. You should keep in mind that all of them operate in the payday loan business. So basically, out of a 100 euro loan for 20 days, 8 euro will be lost for lenders in Russia and Kazakhstan. Now that we are aware of the default rates, we need to annualize them. As we know that Robocash's average loan term is 20 days, we can easily calculate the annualized default rates. Since there are 18 20-day periods in 1 year, we can multiply the default rates by 18 to get the annualized default rate. So if our logic is right, on this chart you can see the annualized default rates for Robocash lenders. So why is this relevant? Well, since the APR represents the annual percentage rate, we need to annualize the cost for the loan to be able to better understand the price of payday loans. Alright, but hold on for a second. What the heck is APR actually? According to Investopedia, the APR is expressed as a percentage that represents the actual yearly cost of funds over the term of a loan or income earned on investment. This includes any fees or additional costs associated with the transaction. What's also worth mentioning is that not all lenders calculate fees into their APRs. To streamline this metric, we can use the effective APR, which is sometimes well represented on Mintos. That's actually quite interesting, as you could in theory at least get an idea about the maximum interest range that is being charged to the borrowers. The only problem here is that it's not always accurate. So for instance, here the APR shows the maximum rate of 950%, whereas you will be able to find loans from Sun Finance on the primary market with a borrower APR of up to 3,500%. So the takeaway here is that now you know that the APR could be used as a metric that will give you an idea of how much a loan costs for the borrowers. So now you know that there is likely a correlation between the APR and the default rates. If the APR is high, it represents a higher risk, which equals higher default rate that needs to be covered by the APR, so the lender and you as the investor can make money. Now, the defaults are not the only cost factor that needs to be covered by the APR. So let's have a look at what other costs needs to be covered by payday loan providers. So we got the APR from which we need to subtract the defaults. In addition to that, every lender has some operational costs. Every lending company has some legal expenses as well as a cost for the development of their IT systems. You should note that most companies offer borrowers to borrow money online, which means that they need to have a solid IT infrastructure to support their business. A company also needs to hire employees, so you should therefore also cut in recruitment costs and payroll. Every lender has some headquarters for which the company usually pays rent and buys equipment for their employees. A big cost factor is also marketing, especially if a company is launching a new product in a new market. The cost for marketing is often enormous. Many lending companies offer a buyback guarantee, so they need to have some reserves in order to fulfill their obligation towards P2P investors. In most cases, the lender also needs to pay a fee to the marketplace on which the company lists loans and from where they get their funding. And since lenders are for-profit companies, you also need to account for the margin of the company so it can further grow. So after all the costs and the profit, you as a P2P investor will get anywhere between 8 and 16% interest per year. Now you might be thinking that companies are making enormous profits. Well, you can check it by yourself by reviewing their financial reports. So for instance, the Robocash Group, which is a large finance group in the PDL, payday loan business, made $130 million in revenue last year. Out of that, $24 million is profit. So that's 18%, which is great, especially considering the turbulent changes in the market last year. You should know that in most cases, smaller lending companies that just recently launched in developing countries don't make any profits within the first 1 or 2 years. There are also a lot of risks that lending companies are taking. So the regulation in many markets is getting stricter, which means that regulators are often capping the interest rates and lenders are not able to charge more than the maximum APR, which is being determined by the regulator. Sure, some lenders will try to operate on the edge of the law and charge fees for loan extensions and other additional services. This is not a very sustainable way of operating in the market in the long run. So personally, what I like to do is to learn about individual lenders and their lending practices. Knowing their track record and how much they rely on P2P investors are factors that help me decide in which lenders to invest higher investment amounts. So now let's wrap up this video with some pros and cons. So the benefit of payday loans is obviously the fast payout, and many companies will lend you money instantly and you will get the money to your account the same or the next day. This helps you to cover urgent bills and unplanned expenses. It's very easy and you don't need to provide so many details. You can literally borrow money online within just a few minutes. But the disadvantages of payday loans are obviously the enormous cost for the borrowers. Typically, the loans get repaid within the next paycheck, otherwise the chance of falling into a debt spiral are quite high. Also, some lenders charge extraordinary high fees which are not really justifiable. So at the end of the day, if there is a demand for such a product, there will always be someone to fill this gap in the market and offer a solution to solve this credit gap. Whether it's morally correct to support the lenders by investing in them is up to you to decide. If you have a problem with it, you can invest in real estate-backed loans instead, which are structured in a different way. So you can even help create new jobs or help build homes for people who will eventually live in them. So the added value for the society is certainly higher as when funding payday loans. A big difference between those types of loans is, however, often the liquidity and the return. Since the payday loans have a long term of less than a month, you can easily access your capital within a few days should you need to withdraw your money. In addition to that, you often get a slightly higher interest rate for payday loans as opposed to real estate-backed loans. The reason for this is obviously the higher risk. You as an investor should decide what's the better fit for you. Perhaps you want to balance those two loan types to get the benefits from both worlds. That's actually also our recommended diversification strategy. If you want to diversify your P2P portfolio, diversifying across two loan types is a much better option than spreading it across 10 different P2P platforms. So that's been an extensive video about payday loans. I hope you find it helpful and informative. It's been one of the most research-intensive videos on this channel, so if you appreciate the value from it, leave a like and comment below whether you prefer to invest in payday loans or in real estate-backed loans. So that's it from me today. Thanks for watching and I will catch you in the next video.